The Unsent Farewell, a destined message. Chapter 1, a knock from the past. The morning, it dawned, quietly, too quietly. Evelyn, 72, a former librarian with eyes that still held the quiet wisdom of countless stories, stirred from a restless sleep. 10 years. 10 years since Peter, her Peter, had left her, left this world, left her. Alone, in Oceanside, California, the steady murmur of the Pacific was her only constant companion, her solace, her sorrow. The world outside her window was painted in soft, muted tones. A gentle fog, common to the California coast, clung to the distant horizon, blurring the line between sea and sky. It mirrored her own life, a landscape of muted colors, a quiet existence since Peter's passing. Their grandchildren, Emily and Jacob, once the vibrant splashes of color in her world, were now distant echoes, their laughter a fading memory from a decade ago. Their daughter, Lisa, had retreated too, grieved in her own way, pulled away. The silence had grown, a heavy blanket. Then came the knock, not the mailman, not the usual gentle tap of a neighbor. This was a firm, almost urgent rap. Her heart, long accustomed to a slow, steady rhythm, quickened. She peered through the peephole. A young man, not familiar, dressed in a courier's uniform, but not from any service she recognized. He held a package, a large, flat envelope. Her brow furrowed, she opened the door, just a crack. "Can I help you?" Her voice, though soft, held a hint of apprehension. "Evelyn Hayes?" His voice was kind, clear. He had thoughtful, intelligent eyes. "I have something for you." He held out the envelope. It was thick, substantial. Not a bill, not junk mail. She took it. Her fingers brushed against the crisp, slightly aged paper. No return address. Just her name, written in a familiar, elegant script. A script that sent a tremor through her, a chill down her spine. No, it couldn't be. Who is this from?" she whispered, her gaze fixed on the handwriting. "It's from Peter." The young man's words were a whisper against the ocean breeze. Peter, her dead husband. Peter Hayes. Evelyn stared at him, her hand tightening on the envelope. Her breath hitched. 10 years, 10 years of silence. And now this? A cruel joke, a dream? She looked at the young man, really looked at him. He seemed sincere, troubled even. "That's impossible," she finally managed, her voice thin. "Reedy. My husband, Peter, he passed away 10 years ago." The young man nodded slowly. "I know. My name is Matthew. Matthew Thompson. I fell miss among some of Peter's things in San Francisco." San Francisco. Peter had loved San Francisco. He had spent time there. But after he died, his studio, his belongings, she had carefully packed them, stored them. What could he be talking about? "His things," she repeated, confusion warring with a burgeoning sense of disbelief. "What things?" Matthew shifted, clearly uncomfortable. "It's a long story. I was a student of his. Years ago. He was a wonderful teacher. Inspirational. I've been looking for someone. And in the process, I stumbled upon a box of his old papers, some art supplies, at an antique shop in San Francisco. It looked like someone had just sold them off, without much care. And this letter, it was addressed to you. He hesitated, then continued. It was dated the day before he passed. The world tilted. The day before he passed. October 17th. She remembered the date. The precise date. The sudden, unexpected heart attack. It had been so quick. So sudden. No goodbyes, just gone. May I come in? Matthew asked, his voice gentle, seeing the shock etched on her face. I think you'll want to read this, and I have some questions of my own. About Peter. Evelyn, still reeling, numb with a mix of dread and a faint, almost unbearable hope, stepped back. She gestured him in. Her living room, usually a sanctuary of quiet reflection, now felt charged with an electric tension. Matthew sat on the edge of her armchair, his gaze kind, patient. Evelyn, meanwhile, held the thick envelope, her fingers tracing the familiar contours of Peter's handwriting. My dearest Evelyn, the words shimmered through her tears. Please, Matthew said, read it. I can wait. She nodded, tears finally escaping. With trembling fingers, she broke the seal. The paper was slightly yellowed, the ink faded in places, but undeniably Peter's. The date, October 17th, 10 years ago. Her breath hitched. She began to read. Chapter 2, Echoes of a Hidden Life. My dearest Evelyn, if you are reading this, then I have failed. Failed to tell you, failed to explain, failed to send this. The weight of what I've kept hidden, the years of silent regret, they have become unbearable. The doctors tell me my heart is failing, each beat a struggle, and with each beat, a memory surfaces, a regret. I can't leave this world without trying to make amends, without explaining. I am writing this over several days, each entry a piece of me, a piece of our life, a piece of a past I should have shared. I pray you find forgiveness in your heart, forgiveness for me, forgiveness for what I could not bring myself to say. I am in San Francisco now, have been for a few weeks. Don't ask why I didn't tell you. It's part of the secret, a secret that has weighed on me for 50 years. Evelyn paused, her hand pressed to her chest. 50 years? What could Peter have hidden for so long? A lifetime. Their lifetime. Her mind raced, sifting through memories. Their meeting in art school. Their whirlwind romance. The quiet joy of their early marriage. The arrival of Lisa. Their life together. It had always seemed complete. Built on trust. On love. Or so she thought. Matthew watched her, his expression empathetic. Are you all right? He asked gently. She just shook her head, unable to speak. She continued to read. October 14th. The fog hangs heavy over the Golden Gate today, just like the fog in my own mind. My mind full of memories, and a search for a son I never knew, a son I left behind, before you, Evelyn, long before you. His name is David. David. The name echoed in her mind. A son. Peter had a son before her? The revelation struck her with the force of a physical blow. She felt a profound sadness, not anger, not yet, just a deep, aching sorrow for the years of unspoken truth. For Peter's silent burden. I was young, barely 20, an art student in New York, full of dreams, full of recklessness. I met a girl, Sarah, beautiful, spirited. We shared a summer of intense passion, a whirlwind romance that burned brightly and faded just as quickly. When she told me she was pregnant, I panicked. I was a coward. I ran, left New York, came to California, never looked back. Until now. For decades, I tried to forget, to bury that part of my life. When I met you, Evelyn, it was as if the sun finally broke through the clouds. You were my everything, my rock, my muse. I couldn't bear to tell you, afraid of losing you, afraid of shattering the beautiful life we built. I tried to convince myself it didn't matter, that David, if he even existed, was a phantom of my past. But he wasn't. Recently, the regrets began to pile up. The dreams, the feeling that something was incomplete. And then, a chance encounter. An old friend from New York visiting California. He mentioned Sarah, told me she had passed away years ago, and that she had had a son named David. He told me David was also an artist, lived in San Francisco. That's what brought me here. To find him, to apologize, to acknowledge him before it's too late. Evelyn's eyes blurred. The man she loved, the man she thought she knew inside and out, had carried this immense secret. A whole other life, a whole other child. The implications were staggering. It wasn't a betrayal. Not in the way she would have once thought. It was a wound, a deep, festering wound that Peter had tried to conceal, even from himself. She looked up at Matthew. He was watching her, his expression unreadable. He mentions David, she said, her voice a little stronger, steadier now. His son, from before me. Matthew's eyes widened slightly. He had a son? His voice was filled with surprise. I didn't know. He says he came to San Francisco to find him, Evelyn continued, reading aloud from the letter, the words a balm and a sting simultaneously. To apologize. She returned to the letter, driven by a desperate need to understand. October 15th. I found him, or at least I found his studio. A small, unassuming building in the Mission District, filled with light and paintings. His paintings. They are remarkable. So much raw talent, so much pain. I stood outside for a long time, my heart pounding, a mix of fear and overwhelming love. What would I say? How would he react? Would he even want to know me? The father who abandoned him? I almost knocked. But then, I hesitated, saw a man leave the studio. Tall, lean, dark hair, a familiar silhouette, but not David. And then a young man much like him followed. He looked so much like Sarah. And then he looked so much like me, my grandson. I saw him, Evelyn, my grandson. Evelyn gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. Grandson. Not just a son, a grandson. Peter had seen him. She looked at Matthew again, really looked at him. The lean build, the dark hair, the thoughtful eyes. Something about him. A faint echo of Peter. Could it be? Her mind, already reeling, connected the dots. The courier, the student, the man looking for his father. Matthew, she whispered, her voice barely audible. What is your father's name? He blinked, surprised by the sudden question. David, he said. David Thompson. The name hung in the air, heavy with revelation. Emily felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. It couldn't be. But the words in the letter, the uncanny coincidence. Her Peter, Matthew's father, her grandson. My God, she breathed, covering her mouth with her hand. He saw you, Matthew. Peter saw you. Matthew's face paled. He saw me? My grandfather? Evelyn nodded, tears streaming down her face. She held out the letter, her hand trembling. He says he saw his grandson. You. Matthew took the letter, his fingers tracing the words. His own eyes, now filled with a dawning realization, began to well up. He read the lines, his voice thick with emotion. He saw me, all those years ago, and I never knew. The air was thick with unspoken questions, with decades of missed connections. Evelyn felt a strange mix of profound grief and a tentative joy. Peter's secret, once a source of pain, was now bringing them together. Chapter 3. The Unsent Confession, October 16th. I tried again today to speak to David, to connect, but he wasn't there. The studio was locked, a note on the door, gone for a few days, private showing. My heart sank. Time is running out. I feel it. This weariness, this crushing weight on my chest. I cough more often now. It's not just the fog. I wish I could tell you this in person, Evelyn. Look into your beautiful eyes and explain. But I can't. I'm afraid. Afraid of the look of disappointment, the anger, the hurt. You deserve better than a coward like me. I have painted a new piece, a final one. It's called The Sunken Lighthouse. It's not for exhibition. It's for you and for David. It holds a secret, a clue, a map to find him. If I don't make it back, if this letter is all that remains, the sunken lighthouse, Evelyn murmured, looking at Matthew. Do you know anything about it? Matthew shook his head. I don't. He never mentioned it to me. But he had so many paintings. Evelyn remembered Peter working on a large canvas in his studio just before he died. He had been unusually secretive about it, often covering it when she entered. She had thought it was a new style he was experimenting with, something he wasn't ready to share. She never imagined it held a hidden message. I have another letter for David. It's also hidden inside the sunken lighthouse. It explains everything, my regret, my love, and it asks him to find you, to find his grandmother, to find his family. Evelyn, my dearest Evelyn, please forgive me. Forgive my silence. Forgive my fear. This secret has been a burden, a shadow in our beautiful life, but it never diminished my love for you. Never. You were the light, the warmth, the anchor. And Lisa, our beautiful daughter. I love you both more than words can say. The painting, the lighthouse, it's a place from my youth, a place near where Sarah and I met, a place of hope, of new beginnings, and a place of endings. The lighthouse stands on a rocky outcrop overlooking the sea, but in my painting, it is partially submerged, a reflection of buried memories, of time passing, of what is lost, but also of what remains. The light, even when dimmed, is still there. The key to the hidden compartment within the painting is simple. It's a date. The date of our first kiss, Evelyn. Remember that night, under the old oak tree? Our lives began that night, a new beginning. Evelyn felt a sob escape her. Their first kiss, October 22nd. She remembered every detail, the crisp autumn air, the rustling leaves, the shy, tentative touch that blossomed into a lifetime of love. It was a date etched in her memory. I pray you find this letter. I pray you find David, and I pray you find forgiveness, not just for me, but for yourself, for the years of silence, for the moments we both missed. Life is too short for regrets, too short for unsaid words. I love you, Evelyn, always, more than you will ever know. Look after the sunken lighthouse. It's more than just a painting. It's a bridge. Your loving Peter. Chapter 4, The Unveiling. Evelyn finished reading. The last words of the letter were blurry through her tears. Peter's confession, his desperate plea for forgiveness, his love, his final instructions. It was overwhelming. The raw emotion, the sheer weight of his secret. Matthew, who had been reading over her shoulder, sat back, his face pale. "My father, David, is his son?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. "And Peter is my grandfather." Evelyn nodded, tears streaming down her face. "It seems so. And Peter, he saw you. Before he died, he knew he had a grandson." A silence descended upon the room, broken only by the distant murmur of the ocean. It was a silence filled with the echoes of a past life, of hidden truths, of profound revelations. "The painting," Matthew said, his voice filled with a new urgency. "Where is it, Evelyn? The sunken lighthouse?" Evelyn wiped her eyes. "In his studio. I stored all his finished works in the back room. I haven't touched them since he passed. I couldn't." "We need to find it," Matthew said, standing up, his eyes shining with a newfound determination. "My father, he just disappeared years ago. No trace, no word. I've been searching for him. I knew he was an artist. I knew he lived in San Francisco. But I never knew about Peter. Never knew about any of this." Evelyn looked at him, truly looked at him. The connection was undeniable. The same artistic hands, the intensity in his eyes, a piece of Peter, a living legacy. "Come," she said, her voice stronger than before. "Let's go to Peter's studio. It's just in the back." The studio, once a vibrant hub of creativity, was now a quiet, dust-filled space. Canvases draped in white sheets stood against the walls. The air still carried the faint scent of turpentine and oil paint, a ghost of Peter's presence. Evelyn walked directly to the back room, Matthew following closely. She pulled back a large sheet. There it was, the sunken lighthouse. It was a striking piece, a powerful oil painting, dominated by a majestic lighthouse, half submerged in turbulent, dark blue waters. The light at its apex, though faint, still glowed, a beacon in the storm. The colors were rich, somber, yet held a strange, haunting beauty. "It's beautiful," Matthew breathed, stepping closer. "And so sad." Evelyn ran her hand over the canvas, her fingers tracing the rough texture of the paint. She remembered Peter's words. "The key to the hidden compartment within the painting is simple. It's a date. The date of our first kiss, Evelyn, October 22nd. She looked closely at the painting, examining every detail. She ran her fingers along the frame, feeling for any anomalies. Then she noticed it. A faint seam, almost imperceptible, along the bottom edge of the frame. A small, almost invisible latch. "Here," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "He set a date, October 22nd. Perhaps it's a combination." Matthew knelt, examining the latch. It wasn't a lock with numbers. It was a series of small, almost hidden buttons, like a tiny old-fashioned safe. 4 of them. October 22nd, he mused. Could it be 10-2-2? Evelyn tried. She pressed the buttons in that sequence. A soft click. The bottom of the frame swung open, revealing a shallow compartment. Inside lay a single folded letter and a small, rolled-up piece of parchment, a map. Matthew carefully retrieved the letter. It was addressed to my son, David. He looked at Evelyn, his eyes wide. He really did write to him. "Read it, Matthew," Evelyn urged, her voice thick with emotion. "Read what your grandfather wanted your father to know." Chapter 5. A Father's Plea, a Grandfather's Legacy. Matthew unfolded the letter, his hands shaking slightly. He began to read, his voice clear, but laced with a profound sadness. My dearest son, David. If you're reading this, then I have found you. Or more likely, my beloved Evelyn has. And for that, I am eternally grateful. My time is short. I feel it in my bones. But I couldn't leave this world without reaching out to you, without acknowledging you, without trying to bridge the chasm I created so many years ago. I am your father, David, the man who abandoned you and your mother, and for that, I am truly deeply sorry. There are no words to express the regret, the shame, the guilt that has haunted me for decades. I was young, afraid, a coward. I ran, and I lived with the consequences of that choice every single day. Your mother, Sarah, was a remarkable woman, kind, strong, talented. She deserved so much more than I gave her. I hope you carry her spirit within you. I see so much of her in your eyes and in your art. I have seen your paintings, David. They are magnificent, full of life, full of emotion. You have a gift, a profound talent. I am so incredibly proud to call you my son. Even if I haven't been the father you deserved, I came to San Francisco to find you, to apologize, to meet you, to ask for your forgiveness. I stood outside your studio. I saw you, and I saw your son, Matthew, my grandson. He looks so much like you, David, and so much like Sarah. My heart ached with a longing I can barely describe, but I didn't approach. I was afraid of rejection, afraid of the pain I might cause. And then I fell ill. My heart, it won't last much longer. The map included with this letter will lead you to a small cabin nestled in the redwood forest, just north of Santa Cruz. It was a place I frequented in my youth, a place where I would go to think, to paint, to be alone. I've left something there for you, a final gift. Some of my old sketchbooks, my very first paintings, and a journal. My thoughts, my journey, my regret. David, please, find Evelyn. She is an incredible woman, my wife. She knows everything now, or she will once she reads my letter. She has a huge heart, a forgiving soul. She will welcome you, and Matthew. You are family. You are my legacy, the parts of me that will live on. I wish I had been brave enough to reach out sooner, to embrace my past, but it's too late for me. Don't let it be too late for you, David. Live your life fully. Embrace your family. Tell them you love them. Don't leave words unsaid. Forgive and be forgiven. I love you, my son, more than you will ever know, and I am so sorry. Your father, Peter Hayes. Matthew finished reading, his voice choked with emotion. He crumpled the letter to his chest, tears streaming down his face. He knew, he sobbed. He knew he had a son. He wanted to find him. Evelyn wrapped her arms around him, pulling him into a tight embrace. Her own tears flowed freely. The pain of Peter's secret was still there, but it was now tempered by a profound understanding. He had carried this burden. He had tried in his last days to make amends. We need to find him, Matthew, Evelyn said, her voice resolute. Your father, David, Peter gave us the map. He wants us to find him. Matthew pulled away, wiping his eyes. He looked at the rolled-up parchment. Unfurling it, he saw a crudely drawn map with annotations in Peter's familiar hand. A small cabin, a specific cluster of redwoods, a winding road. It's in the Santa Cruz Mountains, Matthew murmured. I know this area. I used to go camping up there. Chapter 6. The Path to Redemption. The drive to the Santa Cruz Mountains was quiet, filled with a shared sense of anticipation and trepidation. Evelyn and Matthew spoke little, each lost in their own thoughts. Evelyn reflected on Peter's life, on the man she thought she knew, and the man revealed in his letters, the hidden depths, the quiet sorrow, the enduring love. Matthew, meanwhile, grappled with the sudden revelation of his grandfather, a man he had admired as a teacher, now a blood relative, a link to a past he never knew. His father, his mysterious, absent father. The map led them down a winding, unpaved road deeper into the dense redwood forest. The towering trees created a cathedral of light and shadow, their ancient boughs reaching towards the sky. The air was cool, earthy, filled with the scent of pine and damp soil. Finally, they saw it. A small, weathered wooden cabin, almost swallowed by the surrounding foliage. Smoke curled faintly from its chimney. Hope surged through Evelyn. He was there. David was there. Matthew's heart hammered against his ribs. He approached the cabin cautiously, Evelyn close behind. He knocked on the door. No answer. He knocked again, louder. Still nothing. He tried the handle. Unlocked. He pushed the door open slowly. The cabin was sparsely furnished, but filled with an artist's touch. Easels stood in various stages of use. Canvases leaned against the walls. The air was thick with the scent of oil paint, fresh and vibrant. A half-finished painting sat on an easel near a window, depicting a serene forest scene. But the cabin was empty. No one was there. A wave of disappointment washed over Evelyn, and a flicker of fear. Had they come too late? Matthew walked further into the cabin, his gaze sweeping over the space. He saw a worn leather-bound journal on a small wooden table, next to a stack of sketchbooks, his father's. He picked up the journal. It was David's, his father's handwriting. He opened it, his fingers tracing the familiar script. The entries were dated, going back several months. October 20th. The fog is getting heavier. Not just outside, inside. My memory, it's fading. Pieces are slipping away. I can't remember what I had for breakfast or yesterday's conversation. The doctors say it's progressing. Alzheimer's. It's stealing me, piece by piece. I didn't want to be a burden to Matthew or to anyone, so I came here, to be alone, to face it on my own terms. Matthew's eyes welled up again. Alzheimer's. His father had been suffering. This was why he had disappeared. Not abandonment, but a desperate attempt to spare his loved ones. He continued to read, tears blurring the words. October 22nd. A strange dream last night. My father. The man who left me, he was here, standing outside. He looked so sad, so full of regret. He tried to speak, but no words came out, just a longing in his eyes. I woke up crying. Why now? Why this dream? I always hated him for leaving. But today, I just felt a profound sadness. For him, for me. Evelyn put her hand on Matthew's shoulder, reading over his shoulder. Peter had been there. He had seen David, and David had sensed his presence, even in his sleep. A ghostly connection. October 25th. The light is fading. My hands shake too much to paint, but I remember the feeling of the brush, the joy of creation. I remember my mother, her smile, her laughter. I wish I could remember more. I wish I could tell Matthew everything. How much I love him. How proud I am of him. He is a good son, a talented artist. He will make his mark on the world. I feel him near. My father. It's a strange feeling, a warmth, a sense of peace. Perhaps he did try. Perhaps he did care. I wish I had known. I wish I had understood. So much unsaid. So much lost time. But I forgive him. I forgive him for leaving. And I forgive myself for holding on to the anger for so long. It's too heavy a burden. To Matthew, my son, live your life. Don't let regrets consume you. Find joy, find love, and forgive. Forgive others, and forgive yourself. You are my greatest masterpiece, my legacy. I love you, son. More than words can say. Don't ever forget that. The last entry was dated November 1st, just a few days after Peter's death. The handwriting was faint, almost illegible, fading like the man who wrote it. Matthew dropped the journal, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. His father, gone, but not in anger, not in resentment, in peace, and with forgiveness. Evelyn pulled him into another embrace, holding him tight. He knew Matthew, she whispered. He knew Peter was here, and he forgave him. They stood there for a long time, holding each other, surrounded by the echoes of two lives, two artists, two fathers, finally at peace. The cabin, once a place of solitude, now felt like a sanctuary, a place where reconciliation had finally taken root. Chapter 7. A new tapestry of family. The journey back to Oceanside was different. The silence was no longer heavy, but reflective. A new understanding. A quiet healing. Evelyn, with Matthew by her side, finally felt ready to call Lisa, her daughter. The years of quiet resentment, the unspoken grief that had created a chasm between them, now felt surmountable. Peter's letters, David's journal, had peeled back layers of misunderstanding, revealing a deeper truth. "Lisa," Evelyn began, her voice steady, "I have something to tell you. Something important. About Dad." She recounted the entire story. The unexpected knock on the door, the letter from Peter, the revelation of David, Peter's son, the journey to the cabin, David's journal, his illness, his forgiveness. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Evelyn could almost hear Lisa's mind working, processing the overwhelming information. "Mom," Lisa finally said, her voice choked with emotion. I don't know what to say. Dad, he had a son? All this time?" "He carried a great burden, Lisa," Evelyn said softly. "A great regret. But he tried to make amends in his final days, and he brought us Matthew. Your half-brother, I suppose, and Emily and Jacob's cousin." Another silence. Then a hesitant question from Lisa. Is Matthew there?" "Yes," Evelyn replied, gesturing to Matthew. Matthew took the phone. "Lisa, this is Matthew. I don't know what to say. I know this is a lot to take in." "No," Lisa said, her voice stronger now. "No, it's incredible. All these years, I can't believe it. I always wondered about Dad, why he was sometimes so distant, so lost in thought. Now I understand." They talked for a long time. Matthew shared his memories of Peter as a teacher, a mentor. Lisa shared her own memories of her father, piecing together the puzzles that had always existed. By the end of the call, a tentative connection had been forged. "I'm coming down," Lisa said, her voice firm, "and I'm bringing Emily and Jacob. We need to meet you, Matthew." "We need to hear all of this. And Mom, I'm so sorry for the distance, for not being there." Evelyn felt a profound sense of relief. The walls were coming down. The family, fractured by secrets and grief, was beginning to mend. A few days later, the house in Oceanside was filled with the sounds of laughter and conversation again. Emily and Jacob, now teenagers, were shy at first, but soon warmed to Matthew, fascinated by the story of their enigmatic grandfather and their newly discovered uncle. Lisa, her eyes softened by tears and understanding, hugged Evelyn tightly. "Thank you, Mom," she whispered. "Thank you for not giving up, for finding this, for bringing us all together." Matthew, still processing the monumental shift in his life, found himself sharing stories with Evelyn and Lisa. Stories of Peter's classes, his quirky advice, his passion for art. He saw Peter not just as a teacher, but as a complex, flawed, yet deeply loving man. And in Evelyn, he found a grandmother he never knew he had, a woman who embraced him with open arms and a heart full of forgiveness. The painting, The Sunken Lighthouse, now hung in Evelyn's living room, a poignant reminder of Peter's journey. No longer a symbol of his hidden sorrow, but a beacon of hope, a bridge. One evening, as the sun dipped below the Pacific horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues, Evelyn sat with Matthew, Lisa, Emily, and Jacob. They looked through old photo albums, Peter's life laid bare before them. Pictures of him as a young artist, a serious student, a loving husband, a doting father, and now a grandfather. "He would have loved this," Evelyn said, her voice soft, a gentle smile gracing her lips. "All of us, together." Matthew looked at the painting, the lighthouse, partially submerged, yet its light still glowing. "He wanted us to find each other," he said. "He brought us together, even from beyond." Evelyn reached out, taking Matthew's hand. "He always loved us, more than words could say. And his greatest masterpiece wasn't a painting. It was us, our family, reunited, forgiven, whole again. The past, once a source of pain, was now a foundation. A new chapter had begun, woven from threads of sorrow, secrets, and a love that even in death found a way to bridge the distance. The unsaid words, the unsent farewell, had ultimately led them all home.